yeah, we were basically asked to talk about the link between student wellbeing and educational outcomes. And so we thought we'd pull together and draw on our, extensive lived knowledge of the work in this area and pull out some nice bits to share with you today. So I'll be talking first, and we'll talk about the links between wellbeing and learning. And then Julie will be joining us. She'll be talking about benchmarking practices, and then we'll go through to the summary and sort of question and answer opportunities after we've all spoken. The first thing I wanted to bring your attention to, so over the last 100 years, if we go and search all of the literature that's been digitised in the English language out there, the frequency of pattern, the amount of times these words turn up. So I thought, just as a very good place to start, how much interest has been given to student mental health and child mental health and adolescent mental health, and how much interest has been given to student academic achievement in the last 100 years. So you can see that student mental health and academic achievement through the 70s, 80s and 90s were kind of rising together. And then there was this massive interest relatively recently, really, around student achievement. And you've got that nice red spike there. While student mental health is just becoming increasingly important. So what you're seeing now in the sort of 2010s is there's actually far less interest in student academic achievement, but student mental health is still going up. So more of the focus has shifted away in the last 20 years, away from academic achievement and over to student mental health. And other shifts that have been happening over this time is a change from it being a clinical medical perspective of, having an absence of mental health difficulties. It's more focused on student welfare and trying to fix the problem. In the past, that was the approach that was taken. And the shift now has gone to a much more psychological perspective. So a mental kind of perspective about, the prevalence of the positive attributes of mental health. So we talk about mental health, not mental illness. It focuses on student wellbeing, and the focus is on developing things, students to flourish rather than trying to fix the problem. So I thought that was just an interesting place to start to see, this huge rise now in student mental health, and relative to academic achievement, that conversation, that discussion has declined. So yeah, everything's pointing to the importance of student mental health at the moment. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm showing you a supermarket. What's the supermarket got to do with anything? So I often think of, with this increased interest in student wellbeing, there has also been an explosion of programs to support student wellbeing, that are available to schools, available to teachers to implement in their classrooms to help student wellbeing outcomes. And for teachers, for schools making decisions about which programs to choose from, it's like walking down a supermarket aisle. There is so many things to choose from, and it's very hard to know what the best programs are for your school and your classroom. So what governments are starting to do now are trying to package these things up a little bit more. So it's this idea of, you can buy a menu and the menu already has the ingredients ready for you to go. So you don't have to go and get all the little bits from everywhere. You can come and implement a much more broader sort of whole school approach that has all the little bits in there for you, and you can pick and choose, which ingredients you want, but it makes it a much more guided, structured way. So that's just what this idea of a supermarket, very, very, there's lots of stuff to choose from, that's great, but very hard to make those decisions. Whereas there's programs and frameworks out there that help schools to target where they want to make those decisions. So I'm going to use this horrible acronym WSMHP, so Whole School Mental Health Promotion. So there's lots of little individual programs out there, but the better approach is to have a whole school approach. So, and then you can have programs that sort of sit under a broader understanding of what your school is trying to do. So a whole school approach is a lot more effective to supporting student wellbeing. It really, if you like to think about it, you're actually just trying to do whole school change, whole school improvement. So implementing mental health promotion is improving what the school works and how the school is for everyone. A good whole school mental health promotion approach will develop teachers' mental health and literacy capacity. So teachers have professional development and learn about mental health and wellbeing and how to support students. So that builds the capacity of the teacher, which means they can take that capacity to every student they teach. And it also improves, all these things come together to improve student outcomes. Now, what I want you to think about, and that's really important when we talk about the links and connections, some schools do this stuff really well, yeah? They're highly engaged in implementing it, they're implementing it strongly, and they're really highly engaged, they're doing it really well. And then for some other schools, they've got other characteristics or situations or circumstances that make it really hard for them to engage, or they haven't even started yet. They're not even ready to engage in doing something like this. So there's this idea of high engaged and low engaged schools. And our thinking around that is that you would expect students in a highly engaged schools will have better outcomes, won't they? That there's more impact potential for mental health promotion to support their wellbeing and support their academic outcomes. And so the difference between high and low becomes one way we can measure impact of a program. So then we want to have a look at, well, what have we got some data out there? Have we got data? Yes, we have. There's always lots of data. So from ACER's perspective and in Australia, we have ACER's social emotional wellbeing survey for students. So this is a survey that students do in schools that collect data about their wellbeing, about their learning skills, social emotional skills, and mental health and wellbeing outcomes. And then in Australia, we also run numeracy and literacy assessment. So NAPLAN, we call it. So that tests students' numeracy and literacy in years 3, year 5, year 7, and year 9. So within this data, you can imagine you've got students filling out these surveys. They're in schools, and some of these schools are implementing mental health promotion really well. They're the high engaged schools, and some are implementing it not so well or not implementing it at all. So we can go to that data now and pick out the kids in high implementing schools to see if they're actually doing better than the kids in the low implementing schools, yeah, to see if there's a difference, which leads us to that impact sort of question. Now let's actually have a look at some of the data. So if we look at the social emotional wellbeing data first, so this is assessments of children's mental health outcomes or wellbeing outcomes, which are the grey columns, the column data. And I've just put one other measure on there, students' learning skills, which was also assessed in that survey. And there were two types of surveys, one for primary school students up to year 6 and one for secondary school students. And one of the key features you see immediately between those two groups is young kids' mental health, young students' mental health and wellbeing is much higher than older students. And this, you'll see this in every data set. So as students get older, as they move from primary through to secondary school, their attitudes towards school and their mental health or their well-being around schooling declines. Okay, so that's just part of growing up, basically. So that's not too much to worry about other than to say, older students, they're going through adolescence, they're going through lots of changes and learning more about the world, and it's a bit of a worrying place out there. So necessarily and understandably, their well-being is a bit lower, but that's quite expected. What was really nice in this large data set that we had, you can see we've got data from before COVID, so 2019, before COVID hit, to after. And what it shows, and I've seen this in lots of data sets, is that there's this gradual decline over the years. So it was fine before then, and then COVID hit, and so COVID has affected the well-being outcomes of kids just because of the situation that it was. And basically kids are not really starting to bounce back yet, or they might be in secondary schools. You can see it's starting to dip up in 2022 there. So those are two quite interesting features between them. I just wanted to have a look at all of the data first in the social emotional wellbeing, and just having a look at some of those trends over time. And, you know, this is not common just to Australia. This is all around the world, this type of pattern that we're seeing. So now if we dig down deep, you know, I was talking about the high and low implementing schools. So students in low implementing schools, like let's group all them together and what's their wellbeing or learning outcomes. And let's have a look at the kids. Let's group all the kids in the high implementing schools together. So that's the low ones are the sort of pinky red there, and the high ones I've coloured green. And you can see in primary school years, the years 1 to 6 students, there's almost no difference on learning skills or wellbeing. So this suggests that implementing whole school mental health promotion at that age, that point in their lives, isn't having a dramatic effect on making differences in their wellbeing. But you can see by the time they get to secondary school, there is a significant difference. So it's the difference between the height of the low column to the height of the high column. So the little difference between those, it doesn't look much, but that's significantly different, okay, when you look at a sort of big population level. So it's that gap, that difference, that was what we call impact. So basically in the data, what we're seeing is that students in high implementing schools are doing a little bit better in their wellbeing and a little bit better in their learning skills, which suggests that maybe mental health promotion is making a difference. Now let's look at the numbers, the data, the literacy and numeracy, the academic outcomes. And you can see a similar pattern here. Now, this is a different representation, but of the same idea. So these dots are the gap. So there's very little gap between low and high implementing schools on year 3 and year 5 numeracy and literacy. So we almost say that's very little difference. It's still in a positive direction, but not much difference. But where we're actually starting to see significant difference above 0.2 there is year 7s. And then it sort of drops back in year 9. So that's just the feature of the data. But again, we can kind of start to see that students in high implementing mental health promotion schools seem to be actually doing better academically than students in low implementing schools. So there's that difference between high and low again coming through. And it seems to be happening more obviously in the secondary school cohort, which is very interesting. Also to keep in mind that the primary school students' wellbeing, they were already super high, so that doesn't give them much chance to go much higher, whereas the secondary students do have more ability to go improve. So that there might be some of that happening as well. Just to the next slide. I'm probably racing through, but that's right. So we looked at social emotional wellbeing by itself, and then we looked at numeracy and literacy outcomes by themselves. And now let's put those two things together. So what is the relationship? And this is really at the crux of it. What is the relationship of wellbeing and academic achievement? And it's this line, these lines that you're seeing repeated in year 3, year 5, year 7, and year 9 suggest that ultimately, I've put it there, put simply, happy kids are better learners. What happens when we compare high income results with low income results? So let's pop to the next slide. And you can see that it didn't matter whether it's high income or low income. Across the world, mental health wellbeing programs seem to be having a positive impact. But what is really, and what's almost quite surprising to me, is that they're having even a much bigger impact. They're having a good impact in high income countries. They're having an even bigger impact in low and middle income countries, which is I think there is more opportunity maybe for low and middle income countries to improve their education, improve the support of their students, so that when they do implement a program, there's a big opportunity to make a good, very strong difference in what's going on. So you can see there the differences between high and low income countries on the measures of wellbeing, on the measures of academic readiness. So that sort of attitudes towards learning and those sorts of things, and then academic achievement itself. So, your GPA scores and your NAPLAN type assessments, those sorts of things. So not just happening in Australia, happening all over the world, supporting student mental health and wellbeing also looks to be supporting academic achievement and academic readiness, which is great. So you may have received one of your handouts, was a policy brief that we wrote that actually is much more detail about that particular international study with the 34 low and middle income countries and 56 high income countries. And we went through and did all that analysis and wrote this nice full report and then a policy brief, which we've sent around for you. And it fleshes out 6 recommendations that were made out of that report to help schools select wellbeing programs that are going to work well with them. So you can see the 6 recommendations there to start early in the early years. So even though the outcomes seem to be happening more in secondary school, it's kids that have been right through their education system and heading into secondary school that's when you're really starting to see that impact. So it's actually best to start when the students are young and get them on good, positive pathways early on, rather than waiting till they're much older and the problems, their mental health concerns, are much harder to fix or to improve, to support. It's important to implement wellbeing programs that reduce stigma and build readiness in a school. So if everyone's doing, if it's a whole school approach and you're not just pulling out specific students that are definitely at risk of problems, if you get everyone involved, all students, there's less bullying, everyone's more understanding, teachers recognise what's happening and can, the whole community helps support each other. It's a much more effective way. It's important to support teachers and to build their capacity through professional development. So get programs that support that for teachers is a really good way to go. It's really important to involve the family and other community members. So again, it's that bringing everyone on board and doing this together that's really going to make the difference. It's important to contextualise programs. So there's lots of programs out there, but it's getting ones that suit your particular context, your culture, that really have got good evidence as well that it works in your community, rather than, something that's not a good fit. If it's not a good fit, it's not going to work very well. So yeah, I thought it would just be useful to draw your attention to some of those recommendations. And it's still a long process implementing whole school change. It can take years. It does take years, and change is slow, as you know. But ultimately, what you're doing is improving the whole learning community for everyone. You're making families feel more welcome. You're strengthening teachers' capacities. You're being more supportive of your students, and they're being more supportive of each other if it's done really well. So thank you.